5 million islands. Such was the succinct judgment of the famous Italian journalist Indro Montanelli when describing the people of Sicily over a quarter of a century ago. About this time, John Gilmore took up this epithet as the title of his book about Sicily and the work of God amongst the people of the Island of the Sun, as it is known. Whatever else may have changed since then, there are now certainly a few more islands. Many only know a caricature of the real Sicily, the home of the Godfather, of pasta and ice cream. But Sicily is far more than that, and to understand the Sicilians, you need to know something of their history. Every schoolboy knows it as that strangely shaped ball being kicked by the toe of Italy. Well, kicked it certainly has been over the centuries, and by the look of it, most people seem to have had a go at it at some time or other. Although inhabited since prehistory, our story begins about the time David was reigning in Jerusalem, with the arrival of the Sicilians advancing across Europe to settle the island and give it its name. At the same time, the Phoenicians were colonizing the West as their empire expanded across the Mediterranean. They may have earned renown for their seamanship and glassware, but there is grisly evidence that they practiced child sacrifice in Sicily. Later, the Greeks, in their colonial expansion, found Sicily an abundant source of oil, wine and grain. The influence of their culture had a profound effect on the island. Greek monuments almost litter the country, but real integration with the Sicilians never materialized as the islanders virtually retreated before their colonizers. The Greek theatre at Taormina, although substantially rebuilt, is a tangible reminder of their artistic legacy. But inevitably, the Greeks left more than their buildings and arts. They had some of the world's greatest minds. It was from the bathroom of his house in Syracuse that Archimedes shouted, "Eureka!" having discovered a great scientific principle. He also declared, "Give me a lever and somewhere to place it, and I will move the earth." Moving people has proved to be more difficult. They also brought their gods and left their myths and legends. The straits adjacent to Taormina are the scene of Ulysses' alleged encounter with the sirens. Myth they may have been, but there is still plenty of real live equivalents to shipwreck the unwary. You can still find sirens tucked away in odd corners, but all the Greeks' legendary monsters or heroes, or even Archimedes' ingenious war engines, were no match for the Romans, whose own god, Neptune, now surveys the straits. The Romans came, saw and conquered in about 263 BC. With its immense wheat crops, Sicily became Rome's granary and constituted her power base in the Mediterranean. During the Roman occupation, Christianity burst on the world, and the Apostle Paul supposedly first brought the gospel to Sicily on his journey to Rome. But as happens when orthodoxy allows complacency to settle in, the decline of the Byzantine and Roman eras saw Sicily ripe for a takeover by the Saracens in the 9th century. They too were people of the book, the Quran, but preached by the sword. They too left their mark in many ways. In addition to their striking architecture, one of their most famous contributions to Sicilian cuisine, if not to the world, was spaghetti, first produced near Palermo. The tide turned again, and the Normans displaced the Arabs at about the time William was conquering England. Their dream was of creating a great Christian empire in the Mediterranean, with its capital at Palermo. Under the Normans, Sicily became one of the most evolved states in Europe. The Catalan church in Messina is one of their best surviving monuments. It was a period of enlightenment in which it was not only the first to introduce a parliament, but was also the first to be a lay state not subject to the Pope. However, infighting between feudal lords led to the takeover by the Angevin French. To say that they were unpopular is a gross understatement. Their oppression ended dramatically in the month of March 1282 with the notorious massacre known as the Sicilian Vespers, an event that not only shook the world, but altered fundamentally the whole history of Christendom, sowing seeds that eventually flowered in the Reformation itself. Others came and went. Don John of Austria is commemorated as a hero due to his defeat of the brutal Turks at the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, thereby removing a real and terrible threat to Sicily, as well as the rest of Europe. However, the Sicilians remember the later Austrians and Habsburgs for having been bled by them through high taxation. Then came the Bourbons, during whose domination the island became a colony of Naples, which again provoked deep resentment from the people of Sicily, blighted by feudalism, illiteracy, and abject misery. It was the momentous arrival of Garibaldi on the 11th of May 1860, aided by the connivance of the British Navy, that saw the beginning of the ousting of the Bourbons. Garibaldi is the very stuff of the greatest adventure stories. At the head of his small but totally dedicated band of 1,000 men, completely outnumbered by occupying forces, he first won the hard-fought Battle of Calatafimi, then went on to overthrow the 20,000 or so regular troops garrisoning Palermo. The battle for the ancient Saracen fortress of Milazzo was one of the last fiercely contested major steps for Garibaldi in Sicily's liberation from the bondage of papal dominion. But barely 50 years later, Mussolini's own political wheelings and dealings surrendered back to the Vatican that freedom that had been bought at such a price. Finally, Sicily was the scene of some of the fiercest fighting of World War II as the Allies invaded in preparation for the strike into the so-called soft underbelly of Europe. At this time, Messina was almost flattened by aerial bombardment. With such a history, it is hardly surprising to discover that Sicilians are very complex in character and have built up their own internal resistance to cope with all these external pressures. Trying to get to the heart of the Sicilian is akin to peeling an onion, each layer revealing a very different characteristic, not only reflecting the island's cosmopolitan history, but emphasizing the difficulty in really reaching the heart of these 5 million or more islands. Like the traditional Palermo puppets, you will always see a spectacular show, but are often left wondering who or what is pulling the strings. Sicily is quite a dramatic place with all this history. The hills are no longer the granary of empire, but olive groves and vineyards still abound. Some of those olive trees only hint at their great age. Life in the hill country is bleak and hard, and the small village communities are very insular and suspicious of any outsiders. Omerta is a way of life for everyone, not just the Mafia. Architectural styles reflect the many influences of a long history, but the strange harmony of buildings is at odds with the narrow, twisting and almost oppressively close streets of the hill towns, which definitely feel resentful of intrusion. The old, twisting mountain roads are sharply contrasted by the new motorways, which seem to carve their way across and even through the island. A dramatic reminder that in order to communicate, it is sometimes necessary to blast through the rock. The cities are as frenetic as any you will find. Driving is something else, as they say. Most cars bear the evidence of contact, but dents are hardly indicative of impact for the better. But even in the heart of the cities, you will still find balconies to the apartments in the tenement blocks, providing islands of refuge and tranquility amidst the hustle and clamour of the streets. But down on the streets, it can be a jungle. The Mafia are not a joke and exert a firm grip on all aspects of society. At the major junction beneath this viaduct, in sight of the flats where the Gilmores live, one lunchtime the occupant of a car waiting at the traffic lights was gunned down and left there in the street in public view. A typical Mafia payoff and warning. A bomb-blasted shop, another typical Mafia activity. And this burned-out lorry was left on the street at the back of the church for days as a warning. Private enterprise only operates by their permission. But the very existence of the Mafia is a most complex question. The inevitable product of being ruled from afar by constantly changing and corrupt governments, when men will surely become a law unto themselves. The Roman Catholic Church dominates life on the island. Festivals have the air of carnival and owe more to pagan influences than to the worship of God. Devotion to Mary is lavish. Her giant statue beams down with unseeing eyes of stone upon the city of Messina, which he is supposed to protect. Her praises are broadcast from the frontals of many churches. But the cathedral or Duomo goes one better. It possesses this unique and magnificent mechanical clock built in 1933, which amazingly passed through the war unscathed. Every day at noon, this complex mechanism is put in train to the accompaniment of the Schubert Ave Maria, which sounds out across the city. The central section is where Mary receives homage from 4 ambassadors of Messina, headed by St. Paul, who is said to have first brought Christianity to the city of Messina. It is tragic that Roman Catholicism has actually got in the way of the gospel of Jesus Christ, leaving people unaffected by his offer of salvation through faith and unchallenged by his claims as Lord. Sicilians have a sweet tooth and excel in making marzipan sweets. At Easter time, they produce these paschal lambs, the nearest many will get to the Lamb of God himself. So how can you reach such islands? It is a feature of the present age that travellers may now visit islands such as Sicily by air. But flying gives an instant access, but it also produces a certain detachment. There is always being the risk that you will remain remote from the harsh realities at ground level, and the disenchanted traveller can leave just as quickly as he arrives. Real hit and run, but hardly the stuff for lasting impressions. Until relatively recently, the only way to reach the island was by sea. It remains a major method of communication. There is little heavy industry in Sicily, so such goods have to be imported. The refinery at Milazzo is also a reminder of dependence upon imported power. But it is the ferries running across from Reggio Calabria that bring people contact. Rail and vehicular ferries, as well as passenger hydrofoils, ply the strait daily. Storms can and do spring up almost at a moment's notice, and in severe conditions, ferry sailings may be suspended. It is a dream, at present in the planning stage, to build a road or rail suspension bridge across the narrowest point of the Straits of Messina to provide a fixed and permanent link with mainland Italy. But so many still come and go without ever getting beyond scraping the outer skin of that onion. Nearly 30 years ago, John, together with Maureen and their youngest son Jonathan, took the ferry journey across the strait to stay. They came to make real contact with some of the 5 million islands, the people of Sicily. Their aim was not to hit and run, but to live, work, throw in their lot and bring up their family in the midst of these people. This involves joy and pain, laughter and tears, encouragements and bitter disappointments. But it is the only effective way to reach such islands. The poor old statue of Queen Helen is something of an allegory, not only of Sicilian society in general, but also of the church in particular. Terribly fragmented, and at times rather crudely stuck together to form some semblance of unity. Religious denominations abound, Baptists, Pentecostals, independent groups and others, all ploughing their own furrow. But sadly, the Gilmores' experience has too often been of competitors rather than co-labourers in the gospel, as many groups quite openly poach members from others. Located on one of the main thoroughfares of downtown Messina is the Chiesa Biblica Cristiana, the Bible Christian Church. John has been their pastor since 1978. Members come from a wide spectrum of backgrounds. Giuseppe has a small grocery and provisions shop on the edge of the local market. Here you can get an amazing variety of fish, freshly caught by Messinese fishermen. Fishing for men is more fraught. Every market trader is out to catch customers, and this fruit seller loudly proclaims that his oranges are the best in the world. Giuseppe is assisted by his son Salvatore, one of the dedicated young men of the church. They always have a cheery word for their customers. Pietro runs a vehicle electrical repair shop. He has had to face considerable problems, both business and personal. He is now making an honest living and building up a good reputation. However, it is very, very hard trying to run your own business in a society where the Mafia controls so much of private as well as public enterprise. It is equally difficult to be involved in law enforcement in such a society. Renzo, the elder of the church, is a vigile or traffic policeman. So is Biagio, actively involved in the life of the fellowship. The vigili are not as unpopular as the carabinieri, but the pressures of all the city traffic inevitably bring constant confrontation. Messina is a very mobile city. Young people on the move throng the city centre. Many have a blithe disregard for traffic regulations and fall foul of periodic crackdowns. In an establishment notorious for its corruption, the Christian witness of men such as Renzo and Biagio is clear and shining. Graziella is one of the faithful women of the church. Her husband, Gitano, works for a Pentecostal believer, Felice, whose focaccia is said to be the best in his part of the city. Ernesto Schmidt provides food of a different sort. Together with his wife Ruth, he runs the bookshop of the Christian Literature Crusade, which is situated in a strategic position just off one of the main thoroughfares of Messina. Lena, who also frequents the church, is helping in this important ministry. A wide range of titles, both modern and traditional, is stocked, and the staff provides help and advice to customers, who include believers from most of the evangelical groups. Recently, the Mafia planted bombs in adjoining premises, but miraculously, no damage was caused to the Christian bookshop. Jonathan Gilmore is involved in the ministry of the church as well as with Medivision, an evangelistic ministry directed to the islands of the Mediterranean. This study series he is giving is on Islam. The rise of Islam must surely be recognized as one of the major challenges to the gospel in today's world. Part of the challenge is that Muslims, as people of the book, so often leave us behind in our commitment to the Word of God. The Messina Church are taking the challenge seriously. Arabs are still very prominent in Messina, although certainly not as the masters as in earlier centuries. They have come in search of work. Having left the poverty of North Africa, they have not exactly found the streets of Messina paved with gold. But you will find them trying desperately to scratch a living on almost every street corner. The shielded face suggests he is an illegal immigrant who fears recognition and possible deportation. But the city is tough for everyone, and many would benefit from an opportunity to escape to the hills, even if only for a temporary break. In 1987, some land in the hills came on the market, and through the prayerful and sacrificial giving of members of the church, together with additional help from some friends abroad, the land was bought. This is the Aya, in Italian, threshing floor. The initials stand for Amore in Azione, love in action. David refused to accept the free gift of a threshing floor to enable him to offer a sacrifice to the eternal God. On such a basis, love in action requires that Christians do not offer to God that which costs them nothing. 18,000 square meters of Sicily in a particular way belonged to God because Christians counted the cost and acted in love to provide far more than merely an island of refuge. The Aya is intended to provide a retreat for church members away from the pressures of the city, and especially during the long, hot summer months, even providing a marvelous venue for Bible school and conference ministry when the necessary facilities have been established. Plans for an all-purpose building are being presented for approval by the slow-moving Sicilian bureaucratic machinery. Meanwhile, the old farmhouse needs a lot of work done on it, and a small army of volunteers is taking on the work. Sebastiano uses his professional skills on the walls. Angus is a dedicated young man, a student from Oxford University, here to develop his Italian, and has really thrown himself heart and soul into the life and witness of the Messina Church. Giovanna, recently married, is clearly engrossed in her work. And Jonathan also brings his enthusiasm and resourcefulness to the many tasks that need to be done. These hills can be arid, so one of the major expenses, considered a vital investment, was the drilling of a bore to ensure an adequate water supply. It is now necessary to ensure that the water is pure and remains so. It is very easy for such wells to become polluted by effluents seeping through the rocks to the underground reservoirs. The islander's greater and more desperate need is for the pure living water, Jesus Christ. The ancient olive grove has been neglected for some years and will take a lot of work to tame it and bring it into full fruitfulness once again. The Aya has the potential for being a major centre for the life and outreach of the church, But commitment as well as cooperation is needed from all the members if it is to succeed. Down on the coast, not far from the Aya, is the town of Rometta, where there is another kind of island. Here, a small daughter church has been established. Reno, a member of the church in Messina, is responsible for coordinating the work. They have a small but lively Sunday school which meets during the Sunday evening service. Reno is meeting his youngest daughter Valentina from school. Despite being young in years, she maintains a clear witness to basic Christian truth, and some of her friends have been reached through her witness. So, for that matter, has her teacher, and this in a community dominated by Roman Catholicism. Valentina's mother, Ketty, is one of the pillars of the small evangelical community in Rometta. The Sunday school owes much to her dedication and enthusiasm. Her personal integrity and evangelical witness have been recognised in the responsible post recently entrusted her in a new kindergarten in the adjoining town of Spadafora. A consequence of this responsibility is an increased respect for the evangelical believers in the area. Debbie Gilmore also plays an active role in the church in Messina, together with the other young people. Pippo and Debbie have been regularly visiting this old lady, who has lived in this hovel for years. One of her earliest memories is having been rescued from the rubble of the earthquake which virtually destroyed Messina in 1906. Although something of a celebrity, she claims to have been virtually abandoned by her own family, and retreating into her own little world represents a very remote island indeed. For a number of years, the Messina Church maintained a Christian radio station for which Jonathan was largely responsible. It proved an effective pre-evangelistic ministry. The main transmitter was located high in the mountains of Calabria, on the toe of Italy, and beamed across the whole area of the strait, covering the two cities of Messina and Reggio Calabria, and much of the eastern coast of Sicily. Obviously, running such a full-time enterprise can be neither easy nor cheap. Technical maintenance, as well as the exacting demands of programming, require skilled and dedicated personnel, sad to say, not easy to find. Additionally, recent radio licensing regulations set more conditions than this shoestring operation could meet, involving a commitment to provide several hours of live broadcasting daily. The studio itself may be adequate enough, but to cover the live broadcasting is a full-time job for more than one person. So, without adequate funding and sufficient personnel, it became necessary to terminate this ministry. And eventually the switch was thrown which silenced the voice of Radio Alba Nuova. It is possible that the recording studio will be maintained in the church, enabling the continued production of programs to be broadcast on existing commercial stations in the area, providing a bridgehead with an unseen listening audience. There are plenty of ears out there, but a big question mark hangs over the messages that assault them. Jonathan and his wife Annette have a vision for reaching the islands. Just hidden by the haze across the sea lie the Aeolian Islands, and together with the dozens, if not hundreds, of small islands in the western Mediterranean, represent yet more of a challenge for the gospel. But there are still many others in the battle for the islands. On magazine kiosks throughout the city, alongside books and papers on every imaginable subject, hard pornography is peddled to corrupt young and hungry minds. The city, which never sleeps, has all the allurements of bright lights and empty promises, which relentlessly draw but fail to deliver. While the statue of Mary continues to smile benignly but helplessly on her city, those 5 million or more islands are left as remote and impregnable as ever. But it is the young people of Sicily who perhaps present the greatest challenge with all the potential that they represent. Here, a bridgehead to the islands is a one-to-one affair. Salvatore is committed to the strategic bridge building for Christ, and together with Angus and other young men from the church, regularly is found in the main piazza, talking to people about the Lord. Such work is hard, often frustrating. They will frequently return in tears, feeling the pain of rejection of the gospel of the grace of God. But then, Jesus never promised that being a faithful witness to him would be easy. In the midst of all this, the pressure on the pastor does not diminish with the passing years, even if the word processor may now help with notes and organisation. Paul the Apostle describes it as a daily pressure, the care of the churches. To be a real pastor is to really care, really be involved with the life, the joys, sorrows, problems and hopes of the flock entrusted to him. Week by week, as the church meets to worship the risen Lord, each member comes to be fed from the Word of God, fed with living bread. This is ultimately how the islands will be reached. Here at the Lord's table, everyone is confronted by the supreme act of bridge building to every island, when our Lord Jesus Christ gave himself on the cross to reconcile us to his Father on a one-to-one basis. The bridge across the Strait of Messina is still a dream. Boats and planes still come and go. The old city gate of Messina is now little more than a symbol and a place to visit on a sightseeing tour, but no longer a way of access to the city. History has found 1,000 ways to get around this gate. But the Sicilians, those 5 million and more islands, are as resistant as ever to being stormed. Centuries of being overrun and subjugated have simply produced a race of people who have retreated to their inner citadels. The challenge and the odds are as great as ever. Faced with overwhelming odds at the Battle of Calatafimi, Garibaldi's men looked to their leader for words of inspiration. They got them. Italians, here we must die. In the battle for the islands, it is still just that. Jesus offers a cross to all who seek victory for the gospel. This has never been easy work, nor is it glamorous. Tourists need not apply. Here today, but left and gone tomorrow as soon as the going gets tough. That doesn't even scratch the outer skin. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. What is needed here is commitment. Those prepared to give, to pray, to go sacrificially. Even prepared to die establishing the beachheads. Nothing less and nothing else will reach the 5 million islands.